Hey guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another video on the channel, and what is likely to be the last video of this FPL season. So please strap in for what should be a bit of a longer one today, as I've got a little bit more content for you guys. As we take a look at the last game week of the season, and see how we can get those final points and push up our ranks just before the season ends. So just before we get into the video, if you guys do enjoy any of this content, then please do like and subscribe, as that really helps. So anyway, let's dive straight into it and look at my team from game week 37 very quickly. And as you can see, it was a pretty average game week. I did get a red arrow for about 10k, but I think it was quite an average score. I think what really hurt me was just certain players that a lot of people had, that maybe got a little bit lucky. I would say, just in terms of like players like Consa, who scored a 15-pointer and stuff like that. A couple of people, or a lot of people, I think, in and around my rank had players like him that did really well. But I've also made some mistakes this week. So I've had an unlucky week, but I've also made mistakes, and obviously that's part of FPL. I think most of my bad luck is probably on my captaincy. I really felt like that could have been a really strong captaincy this week, and at one point it was looking like a 15-point captaincy, with Mbemo stepping up to take the second penalty and misses his first one of the season. So that was a 10-point swing, really, which was a massive shame, because not only did he get the -2, but he didn't get his +5 for the goal and what would have likely been 3 bonus points. So I'm happy with the captaincy. It was obviously the right choice because he had the highest potential based on the fact that he had that penalty, but it wasn't to be, and that happens. And then I would say the other only maybe tiny bit of bad luck is De Bruyne. Obviously he missed a really easy chance, so I think unlucky to not have a return with him, and also unlucky not to have a return with Asensio. He was the only transfer I made last week, and they played really well, Villa, and him in particular through the middle I thought had a really good game, and I went with him over Rodgers and over Watkins because I thought I don't want to bring Watkins in for Isak, which obviously ended up being a mistake. Maybe it won't become the last game, but I also don't want to bring Rodgers in because I think Asensio plays these last 2 games with the suspensions and the injuries that they've got, and he's more central, so I just figured that his chance of getting in the goals and assists and getting a haul in one of the last 2 games would be higher. And I think I think that sort of kind of came true, because I think he did come closer. And Rodgers playing off that right, whilst he's always impacting the game, perhaps isn't as likely to get into the goals. So, I'd say there's a little bit of bad luck there, but it's one of those. I'm happy with that transfer, and I think he can do well against United. Obviously, Sarr on the bench has come in for Isak for 5 points, which is fine. I did sell Eze, which again I don't regret because I got the minutes call right. Obviously, Eze scored within 5 minutes of being on the pitch. He's having a good time, but you just can't play FPL like that. You can't pick a player that you think is only going to play 10 minutes. So he did get a goal and did outscore Sarr, but it was only by 1 point, so I'm not going to be too disappointed in that. Plus, he was the more expensive player, so I felt like I needed to sell him. And then probably the worst decision of the game week, and it was kind of close for me, was benching Kiwior. I think in hindsight, I probably should have benched Munoz because I sold and benched my other Palace player, and I think I probably should have just gone with the player who was more likely to be part of a full strength team. But I think there is a little bit of hindsight here, because obviously Isak got injured. Had Isak not been injured, would Arsenal have conceded? I think it's probably likely. So I'm not going to be too harsh on myself over that decision. But yeah, another game week that could have been. I think I could have ended up in the top 100k had Mbemo scored his pen. Honestly, like it would have been such a different shift. But that's the game week. And it wasn't too bad. It might mean that the top 100k dream is over, but I'm also not too far away. And as you guys can see, for the last game of the season, I do have my bench boost active. Sorry to move my face here, but just making some room for the graphic. My bench boost is active, and I don't think this is the best week to play it, but it was the best week for me. Obviously, it's difficult to predict teams and players' minutes and stuff like that, but when I looked at my bench, I thought that the two defenders I have the best fixtures, and I still think this is true. I think Newcastle absolutely have something to play for, and I think at home they've been a really good defence this year. I'm really happy with having Dan Burn for this week. Arsenal, whilst they have nothing to play for, I'd be surprised if they didn't put out a decent team, because it's the last game of their season and they're going to want to finish strong. And also Raya is going for the Golden Glove, so I think they're going to want to keep a clean sheet. So I'm happy with Kivior. He's also a box threat. The Bruggen away at Tottenham is just a shame, because I actually think there's probably a decent chance they concede. They're quite leaky, Brighton, but I got for Bruggen initially to play him in 34 or 33, I think it was. But I got a bit of bad luck with injury, so I couldn't play my bench boost that week. But away at Tottenham, he'll probably make some saves. Let's see how Tottenham get on in the cup. Maybe they're completely abject and they can't score. So it could be a worse keeper to play on a bench boost. And then Sarr, who could be my transfer out this week, but also could stay. I'm not sure how I feel about that Liverpool game at the moment. I think he could do well in it, but is there a better option? I think there might be. And, we'll look at some of the options for me and for you guys in the next two slides for this last week and who we should really be thinking about going out and buying. But as for the rest of the team, I think it's pretty strong. Raya in net, Southampton away, I've already spoken about their prospects there. Nico Williams, as a Chelsea fan, I hate this, but, he's not going anywhere. I'm not selling him. I've only got one free transfer. Munoz could be on the chopping block, but might play. Vardiol, completely fine. Everyone's got him anyway. Salah, I think, potential captaincy this week. I know he had a bit of a howler against Brighton, but back at home, I think I'd put money on him returning in this game. And Burmo, even though he missed a pen, he's just been so good at the moment, and he's honestly a captaincy shout for me again this week. De Bruyne, I think he's been lively when he's played. Obviously, he missed a big chance. I still think he could start and help get City over the line, but again, he is another one potentially on the chopping block for me. Asensio going nowhere, bought him in last week, happy with him for the United fixture. And then super happy with the front three, providing Isak's fit. I think he will be. I'd be mind blown if they don't get him on the pitch in some sort of way for that Everton game, as it's so important for them. And they were obviously extremely blunt up top against Arsenal with Wilson playing. So I think he'll start. If he doesn't, again, obviously on the chopping block, but I think he'll start. And if he starts, he could be captaincy. Other two, I don't think there's two better forwards this week. Visser's banging form. Wolves got nothing to play for. I see him scoring. Evan Nilsson got the best fixture. He's not banging form. He's done okay over the past few weeks, but he's got the fixture, and I think he'll want to see out the season in a strong way. So that's the team for 38. And finally, moving on to my last two slides, and we've got a list of midfielders and forwards for the last week, and I've just put a sort of colour ranking chart next to each player as to how I feel about their prospects this week, and I'll be interested to hear about what you guys think. But for me, these are my thoughts on these players, and maybe who you can bring in for these last few weeks. And I'll just go, this last week, sorry, and I'll just go over a few that I think particularly noteworthy in terms of players and fixtures. So Mo Salah, obviously we've all got. the biggest talking point around him is captaincy. I think he very well could be the best captain, but there are other options. He's not in form, but I think Liverpool will score goals, and he does tend to be involved. So I think his floor is pretty high on this one. I'd be surprised if he didn't at least end up with an assist, but it depends what your appetite for risk is on this last day of the season. I think if you're holding rank, he's probably the best captain. Cole Palmer, I've put yellow. As a Chelsea fan, I think this game is going to be extremely, extremely cagey. Forest obviously typically don't play much on the front foot. We get a lot of the ball, but we're not going to want to overcommit in this game, I don't think, because we don't want to go down a goal early. That's Forest's absolute dream scenario, to just get a goal and sit back. So I see us being quite pragmatic here. If we're going to score, it may well come through Palmer, but I'm not that high on his prospects for multiple returns. I think one at most. So for that reason, I've put him as a yellow. Saka is green, purple if he starts. Straight up. Purple is the best for anyone wondering. If we get team news and he starts, I'm going to find it very difficult to not bring him in, because they're playing the worst team in the league, and I just think Arsenal are due one of those big scoring games. Like, Havertz could be back. You know, they're going to want to finish the season strong. Players are going to have a point to prove with what Arteta's been saying about potential signings in the summer. Like, players are going to be they're going to be playing for their places. So I like Saka for this fixture. And like I say, purple if he starts. Bowen and Mbeumo, these are the two best players this week, straight up. Like, Bowen has been in sensational form. West Ham not so much, but he's just in such good form, he's impossible to ignore at this point. And I think he's a great captaincy pick, like an Ipswich side away from home. And Mbeumo, I just think he's been playing so well, and it's potentially his last game for Brentford if someone comes in for him in the summer. So I think, again, he's going to want to put in a good performance. He just has everything going for him as well, as we all know. We'll talk about both of the Bournemouth assets together. I've put Kluivert as yellow and Semenyo as green. Reason being is Kluivert got an early sub in the City game. I think Kluivert has a higher ceiling, but I'm just a bit worried about his minutes. And Semenyo, I think, will likely play more. So I think you could do well with either. But I'd almost be leaning towards Semenyo for a punt this week in that fixture. Mitoma, I really like this week. I really like Mitoma. They've got Spurs, and this is one I think you make a decision based on how the Europa League final goes. I think if Spurs win, I wouldn't go there, because I think if Spurs win, they'll be on such a high that I think their players will want to put in a good performance after that. They'll be really buoyed. So there's not a lot of confidence in that Spurs team, but if they do win that first trophy, they'll be super confident. And I just think they'll do well against Brighton in their last game. But if they lose, it could be extremely toxic. And I think Mitoma is in good form, and he could very much take advantage of a legged, downbeat Spurs team. So I think he's one to watch. Could be a great differential. Odegaard and Trossard and Martinelli I talk about in the same way. I like all of them. I think all three will start. There's a chance that Havertz starts, but I think all three start. I think Odegaard always starts for them. Martinelli, I think will start because he is their only real natural left winger. And Trossard has played most of the games for them recently, so I'd be surprised if he was dropped on the last day. I know Marino can play up top, but I don't think Arteta's going to be feeling like he needs to find a solution or anything like that on the last day. He's probably just going to play his natural team. And I think they're all as capable as each other as doing well in this game. I think if I had to pick one, I'd pick Martinelli for the safety of minutes, just slightly ahead of the other two. Looking at some of the other players further down on this list, we've got the Newcastle mid. So we've got like Harvey Barnes, who I've got green, Bruno G, who I've got yellow, and Jacob Murphy on the right-hand side of the screen, who I've got green. I think they're all good. I don't think Everton will roll over, but I do think Newcastle will win by 2 goals. I could see a 2-0, and I wouldn't be surprised if any of those guys were involved. I think they're all a worthy punt. I suppose it just depends on who you like stylistically. I think Newcastle will have a lot of the ball, so I think Jacob Murphy for me is probably a good shout for like the highest floor to be involved in a goal. But typically in games like this where they're really important, you want your big players to shine. So someone like Bruno G could be good. He just obviously isn't as attacking as the other guys. Someone who isn't on this list is Gordon, who again could do really well, but for his price point, I think I'd just go Bowen if you don't have him already. Other players on this list to discuss. Rodgers is great. Exactly the same as what I said about Asensio. Minte, again, copy paste from Matoma. Probably not as good a player, but he's still got potential. Forest, again, like I said, just avoid. It's not going to be high scoring, but if you had to pick one, I'd go Gibbs White because he's in such good form. Fulham, I don't love. City's not a good fixture. They need to win. Brentford, Sharda, I think he's fine. I think he's been good. West Ham, avoid, other than Bowen. And Kudus, actually. I think Kudus is decent for this fixture. Wolves is fine. I don't mind that against Brentford. Eze, he could do well, couldn't he? I probably should put him as a green at this point. But it's just Liverpool. I can't put any players green against Liverpool. Spurs assets, no. Even if they win, I still wouldn't pick them up. Liverpool mids, really interesting one, actually. I like both Luis Diaz and Szoboszlai for this game. Again, like I said, I think it could have goals in it, and I think either of those could do well as a 1 week punt. That's the beauty of sort of like a one game punt. Like you can do that in game week 38. Like, would you want to buy Luis Diaz or Szoboszlai for 6 weeks? Probably not, because you just don't know how many minutes they're going to get. But are they going to play this game? Yeah, they are, So I think they're a good a punt as any this week. De Bruyne, I've already spoken about him. And then, yeah, like I said about the Villa mids. So that's the midfielders this week. For me, I like Arsenal. I think they'll want to finish strong. Obviously, Bournemouth have the plum fixture, but they're not necessarily firing. They're not scoring too many goals. And then I've got my purple picks in there as well. And moving on to the final one, the forwards. If you guys are still with me. Sorry, this is a bit of a long one, but hopefully you guys are just enjoying the last bit of FPL content for the end of the season. And starting at the top, we've got Isak. I almost wanted to put purple if he starts, because I think he can do really well. But I think if Newcastle do score early, because they just have so much to play for, they might not keep him on for too long. So I think perhaps his potential is limited. But he could go big for them. He could go big for them. He has done this season. He's clutched up in moments, in the cup final and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got a 10-point plus game. No point talking about Spurs. Ollie Watkins, purple, straight up. Whether United win or lose, they're going to rotate, and Villa are going to win that game, in my opinion. I don't see a world where they don't win, and I think he'll score too, because he's such an important piece for them. Cunha I really liked for this last game. I know he got benched, but it's his last game for the club. He has been their best player for a long time, and I'd be surprised if he didn't get the start in what is a pretty nothingy game. Visser and Evan-Nilsson, my other two purple picks. As I said, there's nothing more I can say about these guys. Evan-Nilsson, plum fixture, and Visser's just one of the best strikers in the league at the moment, and with also a good fixture. Strand Larsen and Marmoush. Strand Larsen, again, I feel like he starts. He obviously did well against Palace, and Marmoush with that absolute banger of a goal against against Bournemouth last night. he likely keeps his place, and he can return against anyone when he's scoring goals like that. Forest and Chelsea, as I've already said, ignore. Jackson's obviously out, but I wouldn't go for him. Welbeck, like I said about Matoma, I like him if you've got if Spurs lose. I like him if Spurs lose. But he did miss a few easy chances against Liverpool. Gakpo, I want to in the exact same way. Yeah, exact same thing I said about Diaz and Szoboszlai, but if anything better. Like if Isak is out, I think this guy is a great transfer this week. The only reason I didn't put purple is because I'm not sure there's too many forward spots that people have open, and there isn't like an 100% guarantee he starts. Like he might not, but for me, he's been their number one when he's been fit, whether it's out on the left or up top. So I think he starts. I think he does great this game. I think he's going under the radar. Palace I would avoid, and then all of these guys I've got flagged with red. They just don't have good fixtures. Some interesting ones to talk about to finish off. Erling Haaland. There's just no reason to go there, is there? You know, we know what he's capable of, but he hasn't scored since coming back, and for the price point he's at, I don't even think he's a good differential, to be honest. Havertz, I've got yellow. If he had a bit more match fitness, I think this would be a green. But I just don't know if he's going to play or not. So it's a big punt, but I think there's other Arsenal forwards that you can punt on that will be more likely to get minutes. And Nketiah scored yesterday. I think he scored twice. Maybe he starts against Liverpool. You're still not putting him in though, are you? But for that reason, he gets a yellow. And then finally, João Pedro coming back to the team. Maybe he starts. Maybe he does well against Spurs. Obviously on pens if he plays. But yeah, that's it for me. That's it for the content for this year, hopefully. Unless we get some crazy team news or anything like that. For the end of the week, I might put another video out for you guys. But if you did make it this far, then thanks for watching. And like I said, please do like and subscribe. Ask any questions below if you have them. And I look forward to hopefully making some better content for you guys next year. But yeah, good luck in the final game, and I'll see you guys in the next one.